Hi, I'm Jody Ledgerwood. I was born and mostly raised in Cobourg, Ontario, Canada. I am 50 years old. I consider myself very lucky to be a child of the 70s. I believe that those of us born in the 70s were probably the last generation to experience true freedom. We grew up without cell phones. We'd get up in the morning, have breakfast, and be gone all day. The street lights come on. That's when you come home. Your parents had no clue where you were. We were allowed to explore our world around us. There was no black and white. There was no divisiveness. There was no discrimination, and we truly looked after each other as a community. Everybody's parents knew who you were, and you played with everybody. You know, the older kids played with the younger kids, and we all looked out for each other. Um, I did move around a lot. My parents were divorced as a young child. I went to 13 different schools. So I have no lifelong friendships. Most of my friends are adulthood connections that I've made. When you grow up moving around as much as I did, and no, I wasn't an army brat. It was just literally a divorce situation and bouncing back and forth between my mom and my father's house. When my mom's life would fall apart, she'd ship us back to my dad's. And then when she got her life back on track, she would demand that we go back to her. And that went on and on and on right up until about the age of 9. And at 9, I made the decision that I needed something more stable than my mother could give me, and I moved back in with my dad. And from then on, I lived with my dad. But then my dad, as he gets better off in life, you go from low income housing to an apartment to a townhouse to dad finally has the money to buy a semi detached home, from there to a full detached home. And then another divorce happens in his life. And then it's just he and I on our own in a home in Cobourg. So I started off in Cobourg, moved all the way around, lived in Castleton and Peterborough and Mississauga and Oshawa and Curtis, and then ended up back in what is called Baltimore, but most people know it as Cobourg because Baltimore is such a tiny little village. So started out in Cobourg, ended up back in Cobourg, and then as an adult, I basically stayed in the area, moved to Ajax temporarily while I went to school, Humber College of Applied Arts and Technology. I went to school for law, um, which is really funny because I'd always grown up wanting to be either a teacher or an actress. My lifelong dream was to be an actress. At the age of 6, I was on a school trip, and we went to see The Emperor Has No Clothes, I think it was, or Midas and the Golden Touch, whatever the play was called. It was that play. And the people, the actors on the stage, came out to the audience to pick a kid from the audience to whisper into the emperor's ear that he had no clothes on, and I was the kid that they pulled out of the audience to whisper. And I remember at the age of 6 standing on that stage and looking out at everybody, and just that first moment of I've commanded all these eyes on me, I've commanded all this attention, and then I got to be the one to let the emperor know the big secret that we were all part of, but he wasn't. And the reaction of the audience is something that just stayed with me. And from that moment on, I wanted to be an actress. There was no ifs, ands, or buts about it. I actually tried out for our school play, and I was dead set that I was going to be Mrs. Kanga. We did Winnie the Pooh and the Honey Pot, and I was dead set. I was only 6, but I was going to be Mrs. Kanga because that was the only female role that held significance, and I felt like I should be significant in this play. Um, Of course, that role went to, I think, a grade 3 or grade 4 student, not the grade 1 student. But I did get to be an umbrella dancer. So that was other than telling the emperor he had no clothes on, that was my first foray into the theater and having an actual role. And I was an umbrella dancer. So, and from there, I've gone on to perform in, I don't know, probably 30 to 50 different theater productions. I absolutely love the ability to make somebody feel something. And live theater gives you that energy to run on. You feel immediately whether you're having a response or having an effect on somebody. You get to hear their laughter, you get to hear their tears, you get to hear their moments. The applause at the end when you know you've done a good job, or the standing ovations. It's something that has always given me energy. Acting was always a great escape for me from life as well. I I had a very um, I had a very hard upbringing. As a kid, you don't realize that that's not normal, and it's not until you get a little bit older and you have some hindsight behind you, and you make all these friends, and you realize that the way you're being brought up isn't quite normal, or is actually quite abusive or dark. So the stage also gave me an opportunity to experience joy and wear someone else's shoes and be somebody else for a short period of time. I didn't have to be me. So it was a really great release, and a great way to escape real life. That's what the theater did for me. It brought me joy. I tell people when they meet me, my life could be a Jerry Springer talk show. I literally could cover every theme that Jerry Springer has had on his talk show, and people don't really believe it. And when they hear my stories, my life stories, uh, they think I'm just making it up, because it is so crazy. And I guess I'm not crazy, so people find it hard to believe that I'm as well adjusted or as normal as I am, given my upbringing. And then they meet my family, and then they hear the stories, and it always shocks people that my life really was my life. You know, statistically, I should be a homeless drug addict or suicidal or something, and yet I'm not. Um, and I think a big part of that is because I've had some really great teachers along the way that saw something in me and gave me the mentorship or the guidance that I so desperately needed. And I guess as an adult, I've taken those experiences and those few adults that really cared, and I've decided that I need to really care about people who are struggling as well. Um, if you've got a good support system, or somebody that you can actually talk to intimately and share stuff without judgment, there's no end to the options in front of you and the person you can become. Just because statistically you should be a drug addicted, suicidal person doesn't mean you have to be. And I guess that was the biggest thing that I learned growing up, is we all have choices. And just because you felt or you've lived through a lot of adversity doesn't mean it has to define you as a person. And at the end of the day, we all have free will. We can choose to let our life pull us down, or we can choose to actually learn and pull ourselves up. And no one's going to be the hero that comes and saves you. You actually have to save yourself. But if you can surround yourself with at least one or two good people in your life, then you've got a really great opportunity to do something great. One of the teachers, and I didn't like her as a teacher, and she wasn't my teacher in grade 7 and 8. Um, I was in a very dark time when I was 12 and 13. I actually thought about committing suicide, and many times was very close to doing it. And instead, I turned to poetry, and I wrote a lot of poetry, and one of my poems was actually published. And that poem was called Mistake Maker. And this teacher, whom I didn't like, didn't have a relationship with at all, she read that poem, and there was something about that poem that struck her. And she pulled me out of class and had me come down to her office, and she talked to me about it. And that, I think that was the first time I actually told anybody about the sexual abuse that I had been suffering, and I had suffered for 9 to 10 years that I can remember. It may have gone on longer, but that I can remember. And it was the first time that I really felt seen. And she pointed me in other directions of, instead of going down this deep, dark path that I was going, she allowed me to see that there were options and that people did care. And she was definitely somebody I never thought would care because of how I felt about her. But she kept me here, she kept me alive, and she kept me on a straighter path and introduced me to the good things in life, and basically sort of rearranged my thinking. Instead of thinking that life was so desolate and hopeless and awful all the time with a few little sprigs of niceness, life is really what you make it. So that is something that has stuck with me. And as an adult, I had always said, if I see a child in trouble, I don't care who the child is or how awful that child is, everyone's got the opportunity to change their path and be something better than they are today, but they have to make that choice. And if they've got at least one adult that they can trust and count on to be there and to listen without judgment, then that is the best and biggest thing you can do. So as an adult, I became very involved in my own children's life and decided I was going to be all in for them. I gave up a lot of myself as an adult to be a full-time mom. I changed careers. I became a realtor so that I could be a full-time mom. I gave up the dream of acting so I could be a full-time mom. I didn't want my kids to ever feel like they were second best or not even on the radar. My mom, when I made the decision at 9 to move back with my dad, her words to me were, I only have one daughter now, and that's not you. And for 4 years, I didn't have a mom, or my biological mom was not involved in my life at all. And I just decided I was never going to do that to my children, never ever make them feel less than because of a decision they made for themselves that at the time was the best decision I could make for myself. So I changed careers from one, I didn't want to go to school for 8 years to be a lawyer, so I went to school to be a law clerk instead. And I started, before I had children, I was auditioning for acting jobs, and I was starting to get them, and I was training for acting for the camera, and I was starting to land auditions and getting callbacks and 3-4 callbacks, and doing shoots and working as extras on set, learning how everything played out, and worked behind the scenes as well as in front of the camera so that I could really understand the industry and how to make it on my own in the industry. But when I started having children, I realized how tough it was to, get a phone call saying, hey, you have to be in Toronto by 2:00, and here it is noon, and I've got now to arrange babysitters and all that sort of stuff. So I decided that being a mom was the most important job that anybody could ever have, being that parent. And I decided that acting was no longer going to be for me, and I threw myself full on into being a mom. I ended up getting myself a bookkeeping job, and that bookkeeping job taught me all kinds of things about money and accounting. And I worked under two really amazing CMA CGAs who taught me everything I know that I've actually been able to use in my life. In every aspect of my life, I've been able to use it. But that gave me the opportunity to also be home with my children. And over time, I decided that accounting was no longer for me. I didn't like being in the back room all the time. I didn't like the routine of what accounting was and bookkeeping was. I was really starting to miss the social aspect that I had gotten used to doing theater and doing camera acting work. So I decided to change careers. I went to I went to an employment agency where they do all these tests on you. It was like 2 weeks of tests every single day to figure out who you are, what skills you had, and what job would actually suit you better. And the jobs that kept coming up over and over again was teacher, lawyer, actress, and realtor. And I thought realtor was interesting. So I started talking to a few friends of mine that I had who were much, much older than myself and about real estate and what that looked like. And what I learned is that real estate, you're self employed and you can work as much as you want or as little as you want. But it had the flexibility to fit children into your lifestyle, but also gave me the spontaneity that every day was going to be different. And I got to be with people every single day and learn from people and expand my horizons. So that's what I went into. After 4 years, I got my broker's license. So I could now run my own brokerage and really be self sufficient. I didn't need to work under anybody else's license as a salesperson. And so that's what I did. And that gave me the flexibility to now be in the schools full time with my kids. I never missed a school trip. I was a parent volunteer for everything. I was the hot dog lady every Fridays. I was on the PTAs. I also now got to, my daughter was in, she was a competitive dancer. So I got to be a dance mom and discover what that was like and never missed a competition and living on the road with her. My son became a competitive wrestler. So I was doing the wrestling trips and and stuff with him, and always the mom in the dressing room and always the mom bringing the other kids that whose parents had regular jobs and couldn't afford to get away from those jobs or take the time off. I became that mom. I was also the mom who ended up coaching every single team. I had 3 kids, 3 different age groups. So I was a coach on 3 different teams twice a year. So I was coaching 6 teams every single year in soccer. I think I coached every kid in our in our county, in Northumberland County. And it got to the point where I knew these kids inside and out. And I all of a sudden was their mentor, and other kids who didn't maybe have the same kind of family support at home that my kids were lucky enough to have. All of a sudden I became Mom Jody or Coach Jody to all these kids. And I got to watch these kids grow up and be their constant as well. And even to this day, I'll be in a store and we'll have the one of the kids that I coached come running up to me going, "Oh my gosh, Coach Jody." And they're excited to see me and update me on everything that was going on in their lives, which is pretty cool when you can have that kind of influence on young children. It gave me a sense of purpose, I guess, that I could be there to teach and make a difference in these kids' lives. And some of these kids come from really rough backgrounds. And I was their one constant. I was the one that gave them the love and the encouragement and the guidance and the advice. They knew they weren't going to get judgment from me, and they weren't going to they weren't going to be betrayed by me in any way, shape, or form. I remember what that was like as a kid. And so I brought that forward with me, that everybody needs a shoulder, everybody needs an ear, everybody needs guidance. And what we don't need is constant judgment. So that was something that stayed with me as an adult. I have a lot of patience and a lot of love for people, and I'm able to rationalize out or justify people's behaviors. And don't get me wrong, I'm not perfect. I'm not able to do that all the time. Sometimes I do let my own biases and stuff get in, but I do my best based on my experience growing up to be a little bit more open and a lot more loving and accepting of people with their flaws. Because gosh knows I got lots of them. So that's something. Honesty has also been a huge, huge trait in my life. Um, my mom was a pathological liar, a compulsive liar, and it brought a lot of hurt and pain in her life. And brought a lot of hurt and pain for me and our relationship. To this day, we're still very much estranged. And my kids, I always say, accuse me of being brutally honest. Oh, mom, really? You couldn't have found a nicer way to say that? And my whole thing is we can build a foundation in a relationship from honesty. What we can't do is build a foundation that lasts if we're dishonest with each other or if we're always flowering over things. So yes, sometimes I have a sharp tongue and sometimes that gets me in trouble. Um, but you'll always know where you stand with me. I'm very brutally honest, probably to a detriment, but because of the relationship I have with my mom and the mistrust, I never want somebody to mistrust me. When I say something, it's because I mean it, and you can count on that going forward. I also have a huge propensity for detail or legal detail. My spouse is always accusing me of being too legal, and he keeps wanting me to be more relationship and less legal. Um, I get lost sometimes in the details of things. And that I'm sure I get from my dad. My dad is very much detailed. He can look at a car and he will pick out the one little tiny, tiny scratch. He sees it. And that's how I am. I see the scratch, I see the dent, I see the flaw, or I can look at something and I can immediately pinpoint what's wrong, but I can also pinpoint what's amazing. I was a whiz kid at those search word puzzles because I could just look and I could pick out immediately 10 words from it without even looking at the clues yet. That's how detail oriented I am. So sometimes that has served me really, really well when I'm looking at legal contracts or when I'm looking at accounting and books. That serves me really well. Um, or if somebody is looking for, as I said, a flaw in something, I will see it. And sometimes I have to pull back and go, is it really important for me to point that out, or should I just let it go? And sometimes it's hard for me to let it go. And so sometimes I come off as very abrupt and brutal. um, and people who understand I'm not trying to be mean or I'm not trying to come from a place of unloving, they get it. I'm really just trying to help everybody be better or improve or present themselves the best way or present their projects in the best way possible. So those are a few of the things that has helped me get along in life. Like I said, in real estate, I'm dealing in legal contracts all the time. So if I can pinpoint the flaws, I'm showing people houses. So if I can, one, be honest with them, and two, pinpoint the flaws so that they know exactly what they're getting into, that's amazing. And so many of my buyer clients throughout the last 17 years in real estate, they've appreciated me. And I haven't always I've never made $1 million off of real estate, that's for sure, because my first focus is on the people, not myself. And when I put people in a house, they're not calling me up 3 years from now to sell it. They actually stay there for 10, 15 years because I find them the right house. And that comes from being honest and being detail oriented and also being very legal minded and putting relationships first over money. Money has never been a big factor for me. I've come from a place of no money. I've come from a place of having money. And I can tell you, the relationships that are formed when you don't have money are so much deeper than the relationships you form when you have money. And when you have money, you tend to work all the time in order to keep the money. And that's where you lose relationship. So if I had a choice between money or no money, I'd always pick no money. It's scary having no money, but the relationships are so much deeper and they're built on real things. So Spaulding Canada, how did I come to Spaulding Canada? 2020, the world came to a stop. Government called on this pandemic called COVID. came into our lives and disrupted everything. My life was going really well. It seemed like I had everything going for me. I was playing my women's league sports, broomball, ball hockey, soccer. I was coaching 6 teams, indoor and outdoor soccer. I was president of the Real Estate Association. I was lobbying the government. I was building homes with Habitat for Humanity. I had a lot of friends. I was working in the theater, and my real estate business was doing really, really well. I was in the top 1%. And then COVID hit, and it literally changed everything. Everything. I saw that there was a lot of misinformation being dealt to us. I trusted my gut, and I started researching, and I started looking at the data that was coming out, and I started realizing that not only was our government lying to us and our public health lying to us, but our medical community was lying to us and our media was lying to us. And I thought somebody needs to start telling the truth. So I started sharing the truths that I was finding, the studies I had found, the doctors that were speaking out. I started relaying this information across social media. And my community did not take kindly to it. And that is really an overstatement. My community went after me in a large way. I was a leader in my community, and I was very well known in my community because of my different interests and my participation in the community. And a group of people decided to make me their project. And by project, I mean, I've never seen bullying like I've seen in the last 5 years happen. And I was hit. They basically attacked my business. I went from being 1% to not even being able to sell a home, not even able to get a client. I was ixnayed from my real estate friends. They all turned against me. Children that had grown up in our house, like I said, coaching all these children in our community. Our house was the hangout house. I had 3 of my own children. Every weekend, our house was full of anywhere from 8 to 20 kids. It was very common for that many kids to be at my house. I lived in the kitchen. I was always cooking for people in our community. We threw all the parties at our house, and we couldn't get anybody to come to our house. We couldn't get anybody to visit us, and people started shunning even my children. Their friends were no longer allowed to hang out with them because their mom went to rallies and protests and refused to wear a mask and talked about what was going on in a way that was completely contrary to what they were hearing on the news and media and from our government. I became an outcast. But I didn't care because I was telling truth. And as I said earlier, if you don't have truth, you don't have a strong foundation of anything. And if people can't trust you, then you don't have a relationship with anybody either. So I didn't care how badly I got beaten and bruised. I was going to tell the truth. And on my truth path, I started holding rallies and protests and putting on seminars and conferences and inviting other people who were telling truth, police officers, teachers, doctors, nurses, psychologists. I was inviting everybody I possibly could to speak out and share their truth. And during my events, I landed an introduction with Damien Spaulding. And Damien became a very good friend, and he would do music at a lot of the events that I put on. And we stayed in contact for a good year, running into each other at these events or him playing at my events. And we developed a kinship because our ideology is the same. And then we kind of lost track of each other because my life went off into a huge activist role, and Damien's life went off doing what he was doing best, which I was to find out a couple of years later when we ran into each other again at another event I was hosting or co-hosting. And it was amazing to see him, and lots of hugs. And he just said, Jody, how are you doing? I said, oh, I'm doing really great, blah 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 blah. And he's like, no, how are you doing? And I broke down in tears. And he said, Jody, let's talk. So we shared a really great heart-to-heart conversation about the disaster my life had taken, the lack of funding that I had, that my business had gone from greatness to zeroness, and how I was really struggling. Personally, I had a great spouse who was with me and sharing this tough road of truth with me. My daughter, my oldest daughter, and my youngest son had disowned me or disengaged from me because of my activism. Financially, I was not in a good place. And Damien said, let me show you something. Let me show you what I'm building. This is where I've disappeared to for the last few years. And he showed me his mega complex plan. And I started to cry. And I cried because I started to see hope. Hope. Financial hope, I guess. Financial hope, career hope, professional hope, with somebody who was on the same page as myself, somebody who understood how important truth was going forward, someone who saw a future that could be better than the present we were currently living. And I started to cry. And I said, I'm in. I am so in. And I went to my spouse and I filled him in on what I had just seen. And there was a spot for both of us to grow with Spaulding. My spouse as a writer and myself, I saw so many opportunities for me. I felt this energy again, this spark come alive. Damien was taking this incredible project that I could fill so many holes in this project. My ability for details could help out build this project. My ability for law could help build this project from a contractual point of view. My 17 years of real estate could help in the real estate development. I was a bartender and a waitress growing up, or when I was younger, so I had the restaurant information, my connection with people, the inside information I had on people just from being a realtor and working in that world, the demographic information I had that I could bring, and then my acting skills. And not only my acting skills, but the last few years of my theater, I learned the backstage part of theater, being in the crew, building sets, painting, running ASM, running props, being prop master, scouting, costumes, the whole works. This was all of that coming together in one space. I was all in, and I am still all in, and I am learning so much more than I thought I didn't think my learning, or I didn't think there was more for me to learn. And yet here I am. I'm now learning, the production side of putting a movie together, the production side of putting a TV series together, which is very different from a movie. I'm learning, how to work in a team of 100 people. I am learning how to build a business, and it's not just a simple business. This is a very complex business with agritourism, with real estate, with restaurants, with backlots, with studios, and with productions and music recording and books and talent management. There is so much room in this company to grow and move and constantly evolve. I'm so excited that Damien and I had the connections from 2020, 2021, and managed to find our way back to each other in 2024. I am so excited to be on this team. And right now, as we're building, I get to do the producing side, but I am also getting to do the legal and accounting side. And right now, I feel like all of me is being utilized in this incredible complex. And when we finally get the investor money in, when we finally get it built, I don't know where I'm going to go because there's going to be so many options. So right now I'm happy holding the title of CFO and seeing where that takes us. But I'm also happy having a little piece of everything right now and learning where I'm going to fit in the long run. I'm looking forward to seeing this company just flourish and all these amazing people that we've now met and watching how they flourish and how we all grow together to create this legacy for Canada, this new future that we are currently building. I'm so excited. Oh, words of wisdom. Words of wisdom. Life is not stagnant. Don't get stuck where you are, because we have free will. God gave us free will. God gave us discernment. He gave us knowledge, and He gave us gifts. And those gifts will take us down amazing roads. So nothing is ever stagnant. Nothing ever stays the same. And this moment in time is so minuscule in the bigger picture of things. And there is always room for growth, always room for more, always room for more people, more friends, more knowledge. And I am so excited to see where this goes. And I'll tell you, so many people say, what can I do? I'm just one person. Well, Damien Spaulding was just one person, and now he's got a team of 100 people bringing this dream he had to life. One person with a little bit of courage can grow that courage into an incredible flower, into incredible life. Courage is contagious, and you have the power within you to do anything you want. You just got to believe in yourself, believe in the gifts, and maybe sit and reflect and listen, and God will speak to you and tell you where you're supposed to go and where you're supposed to be. And you can take every mistake you make, every flaw that you see, and learn from it and grow from it, because those mistakes and flaws are actually learning tools to put you to where you're actually supposed to be. Your purpose and destiny is awaiting for you. Don't get stuck in the here and now. Don't get stuck in the past. Move forward and know you've got the free will. You've got the gifts to move yourself forward, and you can do it. Something you should know about me that no one else knows. The crazy thing is, I am literally an open book. I get with a bunch of females and I'll tell them about my lichen sclerosis, and people go, what? And that is something crazy, but every woman should know about this. And my partner, my spouse, looks at me and he's like, how can you just blurt these things out? And I'm like, you know what? Because people learn from other people's experiences and knowledge. And I didn't know about lichen sclerosis till someone told me about it. And I went, hey, wait a minute, I've been having those symptoms too. And when I looked further into it, I'm like, I think this could be me. Don't be afraid to look at your body and trust your body. It tells you a lot. And look. And if you're a woman, look up lichen sclerosis. Your doctor's not talking to you about it and won't tell you about it. And I actually had to push the envelope with my doctor. Finally, I got the test, and sure enough, that's what I have. Something else, I've got a bunch of autoimmune diseases, and a lot of people, I hear people talk about their autoimmune diseases like it's something to be ashamed of, or something that's going to hold them back from life, or, oh my gosh, they have to live behind plexiglass because they have this autoimmune disease. Well, I'll tell you, I've got lichen sclerosis. That's an autoimmune disease. I have, what else? I have rheumatoid arthritis. I have, oh my gosh, I have IBS, and it's the constipation kind, so it's not fun. I have degenerative disc disease. I was diagnosed with that when I was 19. I have never let any of these things hold me back. I've never been afraid to move forward, and I don't complain about it. So, people look at me and they find it hard to believe that I have all these ailments, and that I didn't wear a mask the last 5 years, and that I didn't hide behind plexiglass the last 5 years, and that I was out there hugging people and loving people and kissing people. Because having an autoimmune disease doesn't keep you from living life. And if you eat properly and you take the necessary vitamin supplements and maybe exercise a bit here and there, these things will never, ever hold you back. I play contact sports even though I have back issues. I play them. And you know what? I'm stronger for it. Don't let your ailments get you down. Don't let your ailments scare you from living life. Fear will only hurt you. Love will move you forward, and you're tougher and stronger than you think. Mwah.